Hello and welcome to Gore and Grapes, where I review horror films and enjoy a glass of wine while I tingle your spine. My name is Carla, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 3. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be back. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for your cooperation, your patience. I am so happy to be back. I understand that my absence has been lengthy, and understandably so. To put it simply, there was a professional decision that I had to make, and I decided to step away, and it was the best decision that I could have made. And so, with that being said, I now have more free time apart from other things that I'm doing, and now I'm able to focus more on personal projects, and that definitely includes Gore and Grapes. I went into a little bit more detail about it on Instagram a few weeks ago. And just follow me on Instagram if you want to know more, I suppose. But otherwise, the short answer, or the short reason, is that I just had to make some professional decisions for my well-being and just planning for the long term. And so I'm very happy. I'm so glad to be back. I'm so happy to just be me again and to dive back into the things that I love and enjoy. And of course, Gore and Grapes is one of them. And once again, thank you so much for your patience and for your cooperation. It truly means a lot. My passion has never died. It hasn't gone anywhere. The passion has always been there, and I hope that it continues to show in the work that I will continue to put out. So thank you so much. With that being said, I do want to introduce the new episode of Gore and Grapes, and judging by the title, you already know what this is about, and it's The Thing from 1982 by John Carpenter. I was actually recommended to review this movie. This was recommended to me by my cousin Angelica. She had said, I want to say maybe a few months ago, or maybe more than that, maybe last year, she had said that she watched the movie with her husband and that she was so freaked out and that she loved it at the same time and just wouldn't stop raving about it, and asked if I'd seen it. And of course I have. I actually I now have it on Blu-ray. But before that, of course, I've seen it. It's a classic, of course, and I have so many things to say about it. But first and foremost, just wanted to give a shout out to my cousin for giving me the idea and opening up a little bit about what she loved about the movie. And I am just so ready to dive right into it. Before I introduce today's wine of choice, I do have a disclaimer that I need to get through. The content provided in this podcast includes references to alcohol and its consumption, but it is essential to emphasize that we do not endorse or encourage the irresponsible or excessive consumption of alcohol. Alcohol should be consumed responsibly and in moderation. It is crucial to be aware of the legal drinking age and adhere to local laws and regulations regarding alcohol consumption. Any alcohol references or depictions in this podcast are purely for entertainment and informational purposes. They should not be taken as a suggestion or endorsement to engage in unsafe or unlawful drinking practices. Please make informed decisions and prioritize your safety and well-being. Now that we have that out of the way, I do have a interesting choice of wine for tonight. I ended up going with a white wine, specifically, and correct my pronunciation, Sauvignon Blanc, and that is a white wine. I decided to go with a Starborough from New Zealand. So I believe this is the first New Zealand wine that we're trying here in Gore Grapes, but I figured that we go for a white wine because this one in particular is very crispy and acidic. And then they also tend to have some really cool flavors as well. So I feel like that just kind of, I don't know. I suppose I'm just trying to make the connection with like white and pure, crisp with icy. And I think that just kind of pulls it together that way in regards to the movie. So I decided to go for a white wine instead of anything else. I thought it was perfect. With it being New Zealand, I thought this was also very interesting to have in my arsenal. And this is what the bottle looks like. I love it. And you'll see that there's a starfish here. So yes, this is quite a coastal and lush green type of vibe or atmosphere. Along the sun-soaked shores of Marlborough, New Zealand, constellations of colorful starfish mark the moment the pure turquoise sea touches the lush green land. Inspired by these wondrous creatures, Starborough Sauvignon Blanc celebrates the rejuvenating balance of land, sea, and sky. Enjoy delightfully shareable taste of juicy citrus and the scent of fresh-cut lemongrass in this refreshing expression of our vibrant coastal landscape. You know, the more I think about it, maybe this wasn't the greatest option. I'm still sticking by or still standing on my decision to have a white wine. But otherwise, I think that this would be perfect. And I haven't had many white wines over the years. I am exclusively a red blend, Cabernet type of person. I do like to deviate to like Malbec, Merlot, that kind of territory. So white wines are still very fresh and new to me. But again, we're going to try this and we'll go from there. And with that, cheers. Incredibly crispy, acidic, but it's got a nice citrusy taste. It feels really good. It's very refreshing. It sits very well. I could see this being paired very well with seafood, like shrimp, fish as well. And just a side note, I just started eating seafood within the last couple years. I was never huge on seafood, but it wasn't until I want to say like 5-6 years ago is when I really started to experiment with seafood. And back in the day, I was exclusively, again, a red wine type of gal. And so anytime I heard, white wines are best paired with seafood and all that, I'm like, oh, well, I don't eat seafood, so what does it matter? I don't care. I'll drink it to drink it. But I understand now that I've had a little bit more to drink over the years, I've experimented a little bit. Definitely makes sense. So I highly, highly recommend this for sure. This is a 10 out of 10. And again, also paired very well with seafood. I would see this being paired very well with chicken or white meat for that instance. I don't eat meat, but I would imagine that this would pair very well with that. So 10 out of 10. And now getting started with the review. For those of you who don't know what the thing is, first I will probably shame you just a little bit. We listen and we don't judge. For those of you that don't know what the thing is about, it is about a team of researchers that are stationed in Antarctica when they are suddenly met with a shape-shifting extraterrestrial that infiltrated their post disguised as a husky. Along the way, they discover this extraterrestrial can assimilate and imitate its victims, including the researchers themselves. This creates panic and paranoia between the team, making it impossible to trust one another as any one of them could be the thing. The film was released on June 25th, 1982. And like I mentioned, this is directed by John Carpenter, the John Carpenter. A little bit about John Carpenter. He is an American filmmaker, composer, actor, and a writer. He is best known for sci-fi and horror films, often dubbed a master of his craft, an icon in the horror sphere. But what he is known for mainly is the creation of the Halloween series. Among his other films are They Live, Escape from New York, also featuring Kurt Russell, The Fog, Christine, etc. Carpenter is from New York, though later relocated to Kentucky after his father accepted a job at Western Kentucky University. He made short horror films with an 8mm camera before he even started high school. Small fun fact, I used to also shoot horror movies just for fun, also with my cousins. And if they weren't horror movies, they were just, home movies type of thing. But just a little side note, that was something we did. I do vividly remember when we made a horror movie based in a cornfield because my family briefly, or that side of the family briefly lived near a cornfield. They actually had a giant cornfield right in their backyard. And so we used that to our advantage and made a horror movie based in the cornfield. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I totally get it. I mean, it's a love, it's a passion, but I thought that was really cool, very interesting to learn. He eventually moved to California, where he transferred to the USC School of Cinematic Arts, although he eventually dropped out to produce his first feature film. He states that Assault on Precinct 13 is his first feature film, as it was a film that was done on a schedule and generally considered to be one of the best exploitation films of the 1970s. He edited the film under the pseudonym John T. Chance, the name of John Wayne's character in Rio Bravo. Knowing this, you can guess he is a fan of Western films, as he has produced some himself later in his career. He experienced commercial decline in the 90s and was semi-retired until the 2010s, but picked right up to the poorly received The Ward from 2010, his involvement in Fear 3, the video game, release of his studio albums, and a renewed focus on the Halloween series. From what I gather, his career continued to reach new heights after the aforementioned. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on April 3rd, 2025, after about 6 decades in the film industry. Other notable facts about Carpenter is that he cherishes video games as an art form and is particularly fond of the Sonic the Hedgehog series, Fear the video game, Jax and Dexter, and Fallout 76. He also holds a commercial pilot's license, and he is often seen flying helicopters in his films. There's truly nothing this man can't do. The budget for the film was $15 million, and the box office earnings were $19.6 million in North America. At the time of its release, the film was received with negative reviews. However, as it stands today, Rotten Tomatoes gives it a rating of 85% and 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb. I thought that this next part that I'm about to talk about to be particularly interesting because, as we know it now, The Thing is a cult classic. Most people love this film and have nothing but great things to say about it. But when I was reading and doing more research on it, I found that it wasn't all that well received right away back when it was released. Part of the negative reviews were due to the overly gory nature of the film, setting a nihilistic tone, since there was no true resolution at the end of the film. Additionally, the film was set up against a lot of competition at the time. E.T., which has a positive spin to extraterrestrials, Star Trek, we had Rocky III, Poltergeist, Conan, and Disney's Bambi, to throw it in there. Compared to all of these films, audiences were not immediately drawn to the film. Naturally, considering The Thing was a remake of the 1951 film The Thing from Another World, which was based on the novel Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, critics and audiences were hesitant and dismissive. Not to mention that in 1982, there was an economic recession already that was setting a bleak tone in American life in the background, so audiences were not convinced or immediately drawn to the film. Keeping in mind all of these factors, it makes perfect sense why it was met with a lot of criticism. And again, while doing more research on the film as I was writing it, I realized that there was a lot of discourse on the film's reception and criticism, which I most certainly appreciated, but I don't have all the time here to go through all of it. There's just so much more to discuss, but you can do that research on your own. With that being said, fans of the film praised the special effects. They were certainly impressive at the time. Their gore and visuals, and the expansion or the spin of such a terrifying concept. There was a long list of cast members, and I want to give everybody their, you know, recognition, but to save everybody time, I might actually just start leaving this part out for future reviews. But the main person here that we can all recognize right away is Kurt Russell. And now for some fun facts. The Thing is actually considered to be John Carpenter's favorite of all of his films. Now, I know that all of you, before I move forward, understand that all of my reviews come with spoiler alerts. I should probably be a little more front about that. But here's a spoiler alert for those who are new here. In the opening scene of the film, there is a pilot who yells out something in broken Norwegian. Allegedly, this translates to, quote, "Get the hell out of here. That's not a dog. It's some sort of thing. It's imitating a dog. It isn't real. Get away, you idiots." End quote. Now, I don't speak a lick of Norwegian, but some Reddit users have confirmed this. Thank you, Reddit users. The makeup or the special effects were created by 22-year-old Rob Bottin, if I said that right, and considered to be revolutionary or a turning point in special effects in film. As part of their midwinter feast and celebration, the British Antarctic research stations watch the film every June 21st. Last but not least, and very importantly, the dog in the film was named Jed, who was half wolf and half Malamute. He is not the dog in the opening chase scene, but rather it was a similar dog painted to look like Jed. And now to my favorite part of the analysis. Like I said, I think that having an analysis and discussing and dissecting some of the themes behind the film can really help and open up the discussion and conversation about the film, and we understand a lot of the motives behind the story, characters, and so on and so forth. I find it to be really interesting that, and this is just me going on a tangent, I find it interesting. A lot of reviews that I read or I watch don't tend to include the context. And well, I get that sometimes you just want to go straight into the review. And sometimes that's all people want to know. Is it good? Is it not? I completely understand that. But I do think that there is a lot that can be included in the conversation. It's not for everybody. I totally understand, but this is just me. It's just my analytical brain coming out. But to begin with, I want to talk about freezing temperatures. The freezing environment has a lot to do with fueling the character's feelings of isolation. Freezing temperatures or cold weather can negatively impact one's mental and physical health by reduced social interaction, lack of sunlight, lack of physical activity, accessibility to food in more rural places, to name a few reasons. And just a side note too, and a lot of the people that, or for a lot of the people that live in colder climate like myself, Chicago winters can be quite brutal. We understand how the cold can be very inconvenient sometimes. You can't move your car, it's hard to run errands, or you have to, if you own a home, maintaining the home or just getting the home ready for winter, also massively inconvenient, and a lot of money behind it as well. And then during very inclement weather, it's hard to get to work. It's hard to, go to important things or to do really anything. And I also would like to mention that, on a smaller scale, when you're cold, there is a sense of urgency. There is everything just feels so much more amplified because you're cold and you can't operate, you can't function under all that stress, because it is physical stress that you're putting on your body. What I also meant to say from this subject was that when we are under physical stress, or when we're putting physical stress on our body, whether that be the cold or the heat, we are instinctively drawn to, if you're cold, you want warmth. If you're too hot, you want the cold. You are naturally or instinctively looking for safety, whatever that is. And so in this context, I think it's important to note that when you are in the cold, you're in freezing temperatures, inclement weather, what have you, not only do you have that sense of urgency, but you don't always have a safe place to retreat to or a safe state of mind or a safe state for you to warm up in, so to speak. And so this also causes a chain reaction for some of the events that we later see throughout the film. I'm someone, as odd as it sounds, coming from Chicago, I'm someone that doesn't weather or doesn't handle the cold all that great. I'm used to it. I have conditioned myself to live in cold weather, and that's not really a problem. But if I had to choose, warm weather is where my body is the most comfortable. And so whenever I'm cold, and this is for inclement weather type of situation, or on a smaller scale, it's just really cold in the room. I can't focus. Like I'm just so frustrated. And that definitely adds again to how you operate, how you function, and just how you think. Sometimes you make rash decisions or you do things that you normally wouldn't when you're under that kind of stress. And like I mentioned, experiencing cold weather in places like the continental US or Scandinavia, where cities are built to brace challenging weather, is vastly different from experiencing cold weather in more remote areas in the world like rural Alaska and Russia. I've admittedly watched a few videos about people in Alaska taking long ferries and driving like 12 hours just to get to Costco for a grocery run that is supposed to last 2 weeks. While it is sometimes nice to watch, the reality cannot be any more glaring. While these people may have strict systems and schedules in place to obtain something as simple as groceries, they may not be equipped like other places to receive emergency services, cell service, or other resources. Even in the event of an emergency, services may not be readily available for hours at a time or may require the help of civilian agencies if those are in place. The farther out you are from city limits, the higher the risk of inclement weather. For instance, the chance of more destructive tornadoes or even simply the amount of tornadoes living in rural Kansas or Oklahoma versus name a city. Not to say that cities in these states don't experience inclement weather as well, but they are more prepared than small towns of 10 people. Given this tangent on extreme weather conditions in rural areas, the crew stationed in Antarctica were doomed from the beginning, essentially, literally. By experiencing loss of communication from the outside world, they were already set up for failure. Panic had already been setting in. They already knew the conditions they were facing if there was no outside help. When you are disconnected from the outside world or you're simply in a crisis, they say that there is safety in numbers. Or is there? The irony of it all. The next theme I want to discuss is isolation, mistrust, and paranoia. With the unfortunate combination of a remote location and freezing temperatures of the already terrifying new guest, it is a recipe for disaster. It's only natural for this environment to breed mistrust and paranoia. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines paranoia as, quote, mental illness characterized by systematic delusions of persecution or grandeur, usually without hallucinations, end quote, and quote, a tendency on the part of the individual or group toward excessive or irrational suspiciousness and distrustfulness of others, end quote. The latter definition is most fitting for the sake of our conversation, but let's discuss the former for a second. Symptoms of paranoia are difficulty trusting others, being hostile towards others, believing the world is threatening, assuming that others are talking about you as well. Paranoia is broken down into 4 different categories. Mistrust, being overly suspicious of others' intentions. Interpersonal sensitivity, which is assigning negative meanings to people's behavior. Ideas of reference, false beliefs. And persecutory, the belief of someone or something is out to harm you, per the Cleveland Clinic. Delusional disorder and schizophrenia are conditions where paranoia is the underlying symptom that can range from moderate to severe. These are conditions that are consistent and require medical treatment. You may be wondering, why in the hell are we talking about mental conditions all of a sudden, especially because this is not in the movie necessarily or particularly. And you are correct that paranoia in the film, as we see it, is depicted a little differently. The first definition suggests mental illness and under false presumptions or perceptions. But in The Thing, it is substantiated, it is confirmed, and it is validated. This is developed by their own environment and fueled by one another. There is nothing false about what the crew members are experiencing, which means that there is a reason to fear and to be feared. It's as raw and real as it gets. I mentioned that the crew members fuel each other's fear, and we see it in different ways by smashing the communications room, trying to eliminate each other by using blood serum tests, tying each other up, distancing themselves from one another, or in different groups. At first, watching the film, or the couple times that I watched the film, that was a glaring theme, but again, doing more research, it just became even more frightening the more I read into it and dissected the feelings or the thoughts or just the overall theme of paranoia and mistrust. I think it's incredibly scary. A theme that was standing out to me while I was watching the film very early on was responsibility and how it plays out in tandem with mistrust and how that influences leadership. And at first I thought that this may fall under the category of diffusion of responsibility. And so for those of you who don't know, diffusion of responsibility is when people are less likely to take action, especially when there are other witnesses or bystanders, and this is typically out in public. There's an emergency or an urgent situation and it calls for action, but no one does anything, and so nothing gets done. And so that's not quite what happens here. The men do take action, it's just that no one really knows who should be in charge. And Gary loses credibility very early on, and trust in authority pretty much collapses. And eventually this leads McCready to become the leader among the group. Well, he doesn't have the title. It's agreed upon that he's decisive, pragmatic, and he is the one willing to take action and making all these calls. And so we don't really see people avoiding responsibility. It's just a struggle over who should be carrying it. And everyone's survival instincts push everyone to rally under McCready. For the next theme, I know that a lot of you might be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But trust me, I thought the exact same thing. And the next theme is masculinity. This was a theme that I didn't pick up on right away, but I knew this was important when I realized that there are 0 women in the film. The only female, quote unquote, in the film is the computer that McCready is playing chess against. This is noted by him calling it, quote unquote, a cheating bitch. The more I watched this movie, the more it just made sense. There are some symbols, or there are some physical depictions or visual depictions in the film as it relates to masculinity. For example, in the cage scene in the beginning of the film where all the Huskies are trying to get out while the thing is making itself known was symbolic. I interpret that as the masculine meeting the feminine, as noted by the blood, positioning of the thing on the floor as if it is birthing or transforming, and some parts looking like the female anatomy. The continuing scene, the autopsy scene, was even more prevalent, with the creature resembling the vaginal canal during childbirth and the way they reached in to examine it. As you can already tell, there are screaming themes of women or females. I say females because going back to the comment, cheating bitch, a bitch is a female dog, which is what the thing is. And so far, it's painting a very interesting picture. Depending on who you talk to, this can have many meanings. In my opinion, as a woman regarding this subject, is society's view of men. Now, in 2025, we see a majority of men, majority because who voted for you know who are right-winged, red-pilled, Joe Rogan loving, alpha proclaiming individuals who are in reality all afraid of women. I specifically isolate these group of men because you often find these guys isolated, surrounding themselves with only men, try to isolate other men, particularly younger men, into their groups or communities, constantly criticizing a woman's every move, and possess an ego only like-minded individuals understand, i.e. men. I want to make it clear that I'm not just isolating right-wing men because I went on a banter and provided almost no context or more detail as to why. I think this does apply to a lot of men who are not right-wingers, those on the left, those in between, etc., etc. But I specifically isolate right-wing men because they are the ones proclaiming and expressing their traditional values and also trying really hard to have them come back or have these traditional values reinstated or reintroduced into American society as we know it, especially with what's going on right now in our political climate. I think that it's important to mention that here. And so their traditional values tend to be a male-dominated household, a wife that stays at home, she's submissive, she doesn't work, she holds it down with the kids, and so on and so forth. It's just your happy nuclear family. And you know what? Whatever. But I think it's important to bring this up too, because a lot of the people like Andrew Tate and those in the Fresh and Fit podcast, a lot of their messages are about fear and hate. It's always man or men should be doing this. Men should be doing that. They should not be doing this. It's their role or their responsibility to be like that. Women should not be doing this. Most men don't like when women this, and so on and so forth. And when you really peel it back, these messages are all about hate and fear, really. It's just the inability to accept that women have a very important role in society and among people in general. I will say a little bit more with this article that I'm about to bring up. I think that's very important. And I don't want people to argue with me and say that politics have no place in this film or that it is or should be left out of the conversation, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I think that if this film was able to flop when it first came out because of the economic turmoil that was going on in 1982, then I think that this conversation is relevant then as it is now. Tracy Moore's article titled "Everything I Know About Men I Learned from the Thing" describes this perfectly. Quote, "The thing is pregnancy and gestation and the birth pulse itself in all its wet, gooey, membrane glory. The thing is blood and shit and dirt and mucus, amniotic fluids and liver-like placentas. It is all feminine tentacle energy and power, and it is horrifying. The thing is nature, and nature is female. The thing is always out there, all the time, like a terrifying siren, beckoning men to join it, to forfeit themselves, their identity, their masculinity, to go soft, to live among women, to submit to our domestic compliance, to become one of us. One of us. One of us. Becoming a man, after all, is a ritual defined by isolation and fear. It requires pubescent separation from the mother and all girls, a simultaneous compulsion toward them, and persistent visceral fear of their envelopment." End quote. I highly, highly recommend that you read this article. I thought that this article and her analysis was very opening. The next theme I want to discuss is Lovecraftian themes throughout the film. I've been made aware that I've been mispronouncing the word. It should be said as Lovecraftian, not Lovecraftian. I've been reading it like you would Martian, for example, but it's apparently Lovecraftian. Never heard of it that way, but I don't know, y'all. English is my second language. Just ignore however I say it moving forward, or correct me if I'm wrong, both ways. I don't know. I focused more on the body horror aspect of the film, which is still very much so, but the more I read and watched videos, the louder these themes became. I love sci-fi and I appreciate Lovecraft, but it does take me a minute to reroute my focus there for whatever reason, but we're here. We've discussed Lovecraftian themes in my season 2, episode 6 episode for Occult, 2009, which I highly recommend that you listen. But I also suggest that you listen, not just for your pleasure, but to gain a brief understanding of the subject and its influence. I won't get into it too much, but as it relates to the film, the Lovecraftian themes present are the fear of the unknown, hopelessness, an eldritch entity. I'd like to mention that they could have used any term to describe the thing, something as vaguely but slightly more descriptive, like creature or monster, anything, both to provide a little bit more context to who or what this is, and maybe perhaps add a visual, maybe not in front of us, but for us to have something to hold on to in our mind, something to prepare us for, or just anticipate. A thing or the thing can also be used as an insult or a condescending term denoting said creature as something below you. But for Lovecraft theme's sake, it's definitely something bigger than you. I say this because it does nothing to prepare the audience for what this can be. And that's the first Lovecraftian tenet, and that's the fear of the unknown. And like I just stated, there is no term, there is no visual that can prepare you for what this truly could be. And as a result, you have no safety, you have nothing to lean back on, you have no foundation, you are truly left out there and to the unknown to guess what this is. So due to its undefined physiology, ability to mimic or assimilate human beings, and its unknown origins, it's all we know, yet at the same time, we know nothing. This has the audience, for conversation's sake, to juggle between the unknown and the feeling of helplessness. Apparently, Lovecraftian themes don't stop with John Carpenter's The Thing. They continue to appear and become more pronounced during his Apocalypse trilogy. And part of that trilogy is Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. I personally haven't seen any of them, but if you have, I do want to know what you think, and if it's something I should be watching, if this has anything to do with anything we've discussed so far, I'm really curious. I find it quite interesting to see that a lot of people were divided between labeling the film as cosmic horror versus Lovecraftian or versus body horror. And those who say that it's body horror will say that the body horror with cosmic elements. I suppose it depends on who you talk to, but I'm saying that it's definitely Lovecraftian, especially if Carpenter continued to incorporate this into his films, especially if they've become more apparent and more glaring. And now we can discuss our pros and cons, but before that, I'm gonna take another sip of my wine. Maybe it'll ring better this time. No, it didn't. Starting with our pros, my number one pro are the themes. And a lot of you might think, oh, you always say that, or yeah, that just makes so much sense. This is what you do. Truly, this I thought was really interesting, especially the masculinity part of the film and the analysis. I thought that it isn't something that you come across all the time or you put together so easily. But again, the more I was digging into the film, I thought that this was too important not to leave out. Too important to leave out. And like I said, it doesn't just relate to the masculinity part of it, but just in general, the themes associated with it. It wasn't really an interest that I had right away when watching the film. That wasn't really what grabbed me. But the more that I watched, the more I was able to connect to it, and the more I appreciated the film for what it was. And there's just so much more to dissect. And like I said, because there's so much, it just feels like I'm scratching the surface. From something as superficial as the freezing temperatures to the masculinity subject, you can really go in any direction and find something to talk about. I think this is also something you find in a successful film. On the outside, it is entertaining just as it is, and if you choose to look what's underneath, there's a whole world to uncover if that's your thing. My next pro is the sci-fi horror blend and its risk. It is certainly a balancing act that they took on. Not to get ahead of myself, but this is also a con that I will get to shortly. For the sake of the pro section, it's here for a reason, and that's because it was done so well that it became a staple in sci-fi horror. You ask a horror fan about a notable sci-fi film at any point in time, and it's guaranteed that they will mention the thing. I know a band that takes inspiration from this film, if that doesn't speak to the chokehold that it has on people. But in all seriousness, there's just so much to praise, such as the subject matter, the tension, which I love. I love the tension between, you know, everybody and then the thing, obviously, and how that ties into the mystery of it all, the story, the visuals, the special effects, an intriguing environment, the ambiguous ending, and the great risks that this all took on by everything that I just mentioned and just in itself. The blending of both genres was certainly a risk. It was brave of them to do, especially at the time that the film was released, and more of that in a second. The next pro is the special effects. Like I mentioned earlier, it was ahead of its time, all thanks to Rob Bottin. And even watching the film now, the special effects tend to hold up quite well, especially compared to the CGI usage back in the day. It's gross, it's disgusting, it makes you want to look away. It certainly elicits some kind of reaction, whether it's physical or what have you. It just always elicits some sort of reaction. And I also, just going off script, like I mentioned, the tension is a huge one. Every time I watch it, I just like gripping my pillow or, you know, what have you. The tension is so real. And the story itself is so relatable as well. And I feel that while not everybody can relate to, you know, the isolation in Antarctica, I mean, I think it puts you in a very real position. It doesn't take much for the film to put you in that situation or to visualize that you are in that position, and you naturally start to think, what would I do? And I think that that's such a great ability or skill for a movie or a director to have, really, in this instance, and for the characters and cast as well. But for a movie to have that effect on you, I think speaks volumes. And that's, to me, one of the most memorable parts of the film. Anytime I go back and watch some clips, even when doing research and writing the script a little bit more, I watch these clips and I'm like, oh my God, I need to watch this again. This is great. I feel some type of way. Let's do this. But the tension, amazing. And now for my cons. I tried to be as unbiased as possible, but as you guys have seen, that is not always the case. But for my cons, I have balanced them as much as I could. My first con is leaning too hard on the gore. This was a common comment when going through reviews, and as a matter of fact, it doesn't bother me all that much. I think it was just fine, and that's coming from me, so y'all already know how I feel about gore being overly done in films. But I also put this in because I did feel that it was a crutch for the film to lean in. So I think that that's something that's important to mention here. And by that, I mean using gore as a means to distract, whether intentionally or unintentionally, can be seen as lazy. I understand that you can't satisfy everyone, and gore is a touchy subject depending on who you're talking to. But if the film's premise is carried by a serious subject matter, I think gore should be done and placed rather strategically. Like I just mentioned, and just to clarify, the amount of gore or, the special effects and its craziness didn't bother me. But what did bother me was its use as a distraction and or its intentional or unintentional neglect of other equally important parts of the film. My next con is the character development and the audience's connection to the characters. Also, another frequent comment that I came across, and this one I will have to agree in, and also, depending on who you talk to, this may not be very important. This may have been intentional, but I do think that this is important to talk about. The focus is on the story, not on bonding with the characters. But I would argue that the way that the film thrusted the audience into the story gave them no time to build any connection to any other member of the team other than MacReady, and even then you have a small window of time with him as well. It is said allegedly that MacReady was to have a background story where he was a Vietnam War helicopter pilot involved in some tragedy or in some accident. And so he was suffering from PTSD, severe insomnia, alcoholism, etc. This didn't make the finished cut of the film, obviously, but I felt that even just a little bit of this could have helped create something for the audience, or for something for the audience to attach to, even if it was just to one person, i.e. the main fucking character. Additionally, because of the fast exposure of the story or to the story, the audience naturally only sees MacReady and a ton of crew members by his side. I did have a hard time remembering who was who and what they were doing and who they were referencing. That was a feeling that I had almost immediately, like the first time I saw this. This is also why I had to watch this more than once to make sure that I connected with everyone and I knew what the hell was going on. And it does become annoying to do this if you want to watch something once and you want to get it right the first time. You don't want to keep watching it all over again, or unless you really like it. I don't know. But I did think that it was quite a chore. I think that it was unnecessary and neglectful. My next con is regarding the fast-paced introduction. This also has a lot to do with following the novel, because I'm sure there was some influence with the novel over the production and getting everything right, choosing what stays, what goes, and having a very strict time frame above it all. I haven't read the OG novel, so take this con with a grain of salt, but the novel looming over their shoulders may have influenced the pace of the film. I say this because there were some key points that we just mentioned that were glossed over, like character development and leaning hard into the gore. If you've read the novel before, let me know what you think and correct me if I'm wrong. I know it's something that a lot of film adaptations seem to be victims of, and it can go really either way. I'm not a huge fan of film adaptations. I do feel, like I just said, there is some influence looming over the production, and that can really make or break the film. And so my overall rating for the thing is a 9 out of 10. I tried very hard to be fair and to take into account all the cons that I just mentioned. I did knock down 1 point for that. I was going to rate this an 8.5, but I also take into account how this film makes me feel and my relationship to the film. Like I said, also very important to take a note of. I am not a film critic, mind you, so I don't have to stick to those rigid rules. So it's a 9 out of 10 for me. It's a fantastic film. all around. I love it. Everybody I know loves it. And what's just not to love about this film? The Thing had it all: a compelling story, insane and innovative visuals, a chilling environment, disgusting creatures, dark overtones, terrifying themes, and it was truly genre bending. It was set up for success and struck fear in those who were daring enough to watch it. However, The Thing is also the perfect example of being at the right place at the wrong time. Competing against many films spanning different genres that were generally more uplifting, and its overall nihilistic tone in the face of economic turmoil, audiences felt disconnected, and the film's success was severely compromised at the time of its release. Between the overabundance of gore and a superficial connection to the larger number or to a large number of characters, many felt that this greatly hindered the progress of the film by failing to address integral parts of the film rather than submerging them into a darker, colder world by drawing deeper connections. Many believe this to be tone deaf and neglectful. This in turn may have turned away many audience members. While the aforementioned may be true, it managed to gain a cult following years after its release due to the extreme nature of the subject matter, its revolutionary special effects, catapulting science fiction into the mainstream, taking horror to new heights, amazing tension, mystery, and of course, Kurt Russell. My personal favorite scene was the blood serum experiment scene, which in my opinion is the best depiction of mistrust and paranoia with a gut-wrenching twist, and its visuals as well were just fantastic. This scene seized the opportunity to flex both its analytic and creative muscles by way of whodunit style and capping it with over-the-top gore. Despite its flaws, it is greatly supported by its many strengths, and one of them standing the test of time, a skill that is only mastered by a few. I watched The Thing on Blu-ray, but you may watch on streaming platforms as well. I do hope you found tonight's episode especially dreadful, but I want to know, what do you think? Do you agree with my analysis and my take on the film? Do you disagree? Is there anything that you would have added? Is there anything that stood out to you? And why do you, most importantly, love this film or not like it? I'm curious to hear what you all have to say. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can get more of me and more more wine. Thank you so much. I am so happy to finally release this out to everybody. I had a great time writing the script and sitting on it for a couple months. Thank you so much for your patience and your cooperation. Once again, this was so much fun to do. I loved writing about it, and I am looking forward to everything else that I will be incorporating into Gore and Grapes. I will catch you all very soon. Goodbye.